Welcome to Realizing Real Estate. Each week we will be issuing a new edition, an interview with an investor, developer, business leader, government official, scholars, and others, all who in some way impact the world of real estate and the quality of your investment. Real estate has many facets. We will explore many of them in these brief podcasts. Every one of our guests will be interviewed in greater depth and length on our weekly radio show, Our House, which is broadcast every Saturday at 9 a.m. on WBN 9:30 a.m. and 98.5 FM HD3 in the Buffalo Niagara Marketplace, but is accessible anywhere in the world on the Odyssey app or at WBN.com. All of Realizing Real Estate podcasts are available at the iTunes Store, and our House radio shows are archived on our blog at huntrealestate.com. Join us every week and give us your feedback and suggestions for future topics, also at huntrealestate.com. Welcome to Realizing Real Estate. This is Peter Hunt, and this is our latest episode. And here to help me with, one of the most interesting conversations I've had in a long time is Tom Wiley, the president and publisher of the Buffalo News. Good morning, Tom.
Morning.
It's good to have you here. Tom, you are in the midst of an industry that has gone through an incredible amount of change, and you yourself have been through various phases as your career has gone along. Give us a short version of your career. It's because you've been to many places and done many things, but how did you get here?
Well, so started needing to pay some bills coming out of college, so got a job as a sales rep was lucky enough to work for a Gannett newspaper in Lansing, Michigan, which really is a deep dive into data analytics, even at that level. To say they were into details would be a gross understatement. So came up through sales and really learned the business and learned the value of the particular audiences that newspapers were creating. This is the audience that consumes journalism. And to this day, it's the same audience as it was when I started in the mid-'90s. Basically, it's upper education, upper income homeowners with kids who vote. And they care about journalism because they care about their taxes and they care about their families. And
they're rooted.
They really are rooted, and they're engaged. And so my career came up of figuring out different ways of using that audience that we had at our fingertips, which is very large and very engaged and very valuable, but became more and more of a niche because of the level of competition coming from other media streams, particularly with the digital options and the free distribution of the web. And so once we went through the throes of the industry figuring out how do we participate in that. And I think we made an awful lot of mistakes over a long time thinking, how do we produce a newspaper online? At one point, we were literally, selling ad adjacencies to articles online like we do in the newspaper, not using targeting and not using retargeting and things like that. But what I realized is that in the end, it comes down to the value of the audience is sort of empirical. It either creates results for the advertiser, it does not, and the value of the content is what creates the value of that audience, which of course is the quality, the caliber, and the I would say the interest level in the journalism that's created. And real journalism aggregates a very loyal and very valuable audience, and that's really where we've settled. Is that's the key.
When you look at journalism today, whether it's online or print or however it's distributed, where does AI play into this? I play around with various AI options on my computer regularly when I'm considering writing something, and invariably in less than 5 seconds I can get a pretty well written something on something.
Yeah.
How do you rationalize that with what you have to produce some interest in the public?
Well, I think a couple things. One is I think AI has a huge opportunity for us to do a lot of the basic information gathering. Think of something like Otter AI that can summarize a meeting that you have with your staff, or summarize a podcast like this. If someone were recording it, we could put out a pretty quick email summary out of Otter AI. Imagine something like that for a town hall meeting or a zoning meeting or a school board meeting, excuse me, where you could gather the basic information, the facts, and go through and sift through that and have those things surfaced for an editor and a writer who understands that particular niche and then for them to use that as the beginning of where the follow-up comes. In a less serious mode, maybe it's high school sports can be aggregated in a way that doesn't require a journalist going and aggregating the scores, but could be spending their time on the photojournalism and or the narrative behind it, and the meaning behind why that's happening. And so I see huge opportunity for that. I would also say that AI is going to get better and better and better. You can kind of tell AI now. There's lots of hyphens, and it always finishes its thing with in conclusion, and then you always read the thing, and which is probably healthy for us to be able to identify those things. But I think that there's going to be real issues on the ability to produce quality content that is not journalistically true. And so I think the journalism side of it is going to be a very important side, which is what is the professionalism and what is sort of the moral compass behind the facts of what really happened. And if you choose to rely on AI to do fact gathering, and the fact gathering is happening through sources that don't have the actual facts correct, then by definition you're going to be getting information that's not accurate, and then of course the conclusions drawn are equally inaccurate.
The world's betting on AI changing everything and making life different and better and everybody more productive, and we're not going to solve that today. But interestingly, a person like you, in the position you're in as president and publisher of the Buffalo News, historically in this town, that's been among the most powerful positions in the whole community, and there's no question that that's still the case. How do you then, in that position, look around you and look at the leadership and the state of leadership in this community and what you see perhaps in the next 2 to 5 years?
It's interesting. You're asking that. This is going to be a huge focus of ours in 2025. When we launch our prospectus publication, which comes out at the end of February, which is a forward-looking sort of economic, I would say, series of stories and sets of information to help us navigate what we think the next year or so is going to look like. It's going to be focused heavily on what are the opportunities for economic growth and cultural growth across the whole region. And I think fundamentally there's an opportunity around the next generation of leadership. And I use that loosely because I don't want the generation of leadership to sound like an age conversation. I'm talking about the people that are rising stars and have their own interest in leading some of the cultural change and some of the economic growth that's happening in our community. That could be new to the community. That could be new. It could be age driven. It could be opportunity driven. But the real focus is on who are those people with the ideas and the ability to make those ideas happen, and how do we bring together the various institutions and individuals that are already participating in some of that in a way that allows us to have a dialogue about what's next. And so in leadership in particular, this idea spawned from a conversation where we were talking about all of the institutions that are having leadership change in the last year and a half or 2 years and in the next couple of years. And just to pick on one sector, I'll leave the nonprofits and many of the business transitions alone, but just in the political sector, we have a relatively new governor. We could have a brand new governor. We're going to have a new county executive. We have a new mayor, and of course, many positions within those organizations are changing over. And you can go down into the political ends of the various boards and school superintendents and things like that. And so I think as we look at the number of those important leadership positions that are going to turn over in the next couple of years, now more than ever is the time to bring together the community in a way that allows them to talk to each other, support each other, ideate together around what those opportunities are, and then act on them. And I think from our position as a news organization, we want to report on those actions, and not just what doesn't work, but what is working. And we want to surface the things that are working, and we want to build an understanding with our readership that there are things that are working, there are ways they can engage, there are opportunities for being a part of that rather than just an observer, or worse, maybe a doubter.
I would like to ask you how, and that would take another hour or so, but you touched on a couple of things.
that are critically important, I think, the future of this community. and by inference, the value of real estate in this community. And to the extent that there's greater civic engagement, particularly among younger people. And not to get age specific, but we have a void, let's say, in a certain age bracket in this community that are just not engaged. And that there's a number of reasons for that, and I'm not sure I understand them all. And so let's say that's a challenge. And so what you're talking about in terms of prospectus is an opportunity to engage and maybe appeal to more people in terms of how they're going to engage in a civic sense in our community. Mm-hmm. And you also touched on one thing which I just want you to expand on quickly, and that is this a possibility or do we have the potential now to expand our political class beyond the next guy in line?
Well, that's interesting. Well, I would say a couple things. One is I think there's a hunger across the board, both in the current sort of established leadership, sort of heavily involved, certainly philanthropically involved people to expand that group so that it doesn't just keep getting smaller as that generation ages out. I would also argue that I think it's a little bit. I think the next generation is engaged. They're just differently engaged, and I think we have to understand how to meet those expectations of that generation in ways that make sense of them, in ways that makes them feel like they're welcome and they're a part of that solution. And I would say, in many times, handing over the keys to actually, doing the solution rather than telling them what to do. And I think that's something very different. The way I approach my position is, I understand the power of the publisher position in the marketplace, but I really don't want to be in a position where I'm using the editorial board to preach at people about what they ought to do. I want to encourage engagement, and I want people to opt in ways that make sense to them. And I think if we can tell a few hundred people exactly what to do, then you sort of operationalize this conversation. If you can get 10,000 people to opt in their own way, and that's 80% aligned with what the established group is thinking, I think we're all better off. And so, and I think as far as the political class that you talk about, I think that is, I think it has the potential to be a natural outgrowth to where we're not seeing politicians that are trying to solve complicated problems and leaders in those positions as fools who took a horrible job that doesn't pay much, but as people who are actually contributing in a really meaningful way towards the growth of the community. And I think there are political leaders out there now that fall into those buckets that might not be sitting in political offices, but are involved in organizations that have the potential to have a huge impact in the community.
In the study of government, we used to call those people statesmen as opposed to politicians, which I think is a great term. Last question. Do you feel that this is a terrible way to ask a question, but do you feel that your industry, as it's exploded really in terms of the whole number of media options, which are almost uncountable, do you feel that you've confused the public and made the process that much more difficult, such that people pigeonhole themselves? They say, I'm only going to watch this one thing, or I'm only going to look at this one type of topic, and if I go into YouTube, I'm going to get only those kind of videos that I've already had some kind of interest in.
Yeah.
Are we not narrowing the public out there to such a point where they're not expanding their horizons? Is that a byproduct of the media world today?
Well, so it's funny because I have this joke with my friends and colleagues where when they refer to the media, I always say to them, "Can you tell me what you're talking about?" Because
which one? Or
yeah, I mean, I don't I don't feel like I've got much affinity with MSNBC or Fox, and I will tell you that the challenge, particularly in television, which I would include broadcast, cable, and streaming services because all of our TVs are really computers. Everything is streaming now. Yep. But I would also say in the audio space, it's the same thing, whether it's Spotify or whether it's satellite or whether it's Pandora or whether it's podcasting. The more sensational and the more sort of off the charts the vitriol is, the better the ratings. And when you think about something as simple as, and this is an amazing statistic, but the largest cable channel in the United States, the number one most watched cable channel in the United States is Fox News. And Fox News has something like 2.8 million viewers in prime time in a week. And how many adults are there in North America? Well, the answer is about 280 million, which means Fox News reaches 1% of the population. And so I think that the media in that particular space is fighting for scraps, and they are battling out over the minutia of ratings, which have huge impact on their revenues. And so what's rewarded, particularly in that space, is very, very small increments of incremental audience, which gain a tiny bit of share. If there's 300 cable channels and every cable channel has their fair share, each cable channel has 1/3 of 1% of the population. But that's not the case. And so I think that the problem we've got is that the proliferation and frankly the ease of publishing of very inexpensive, being able to get a message out like this today, where we'll be on Facebook or YouTube or something like that. It's virtually free to distribute it. So that means that the options for the consumer is multiplying infinitely. And if the systems can tag and recognize the content of all of those, then they can feed them to us, and the ones that give us a little endorphin rush at the end of each listen or view. And if that moves the needle by 100,000 people, then it's a gigantic change in the value proposition. And so I think the issue is really systemic in that there is no one sort of aggregator of that information anymore. There's no Walter Cronkite anymore. And so that information is available, and you can pick and choose. And when a news outlet tells you more of what you want to hear than what you don't, you tend to go back to it. And it takes a curious mind. It takes a critical thinker. It takes a pretty savvy media consumer to think, well, I am going to consume 5 different versions of that and triangulate on my own truth rather than accept somebody else's.
That's a key phrase, my own truth, which might have nothing to do with the facts. But anyway, Tom Wiley, you've opened my eyes certainly on a bunch of issues here today, and I appreciate that. And I hope our viewers have also had an opportunity to gain some insights through what you've said. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll be back with another episode of Realizing Real Estate very soon. Thank you for being with us.